The first angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up.
Hello everybody, and welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about the Millennial Reign of Christ Part 3, the first trumpet. Now this whole series it revolves around the idea that maybe this anticipated second coming of Jesus Christ, maybe instead of that event being upcoming in our future, maybe that's already happened. Now that's sort of a far out concept, but I'm going to present some biblical verses that I think are very interesting, as well as some physical evidences. So let's just jump right into it. Now, the book of Revelation in chapter 20, verses 7 through 9, they allude to a period of time after Jesus returns, his second coming, after his millennial reign on earth. There's going to be a time after that that's referred to here in these verses. And looking at verse 7, it just says, when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison, and he comes out to deceive the nations that are at the four corners of the earth. And you have this final battle of Gog and Magog, and could that be us? So I think the speculation is we might be living through this period of time. Now, I'm going to share with you 7 instances in the Bible where I think it talks about the imminent return of Jesus. And the first 5 examples that I'm going to share are coming from Jesus himself. And what I want you to pay attention to is the dualistic nature of these instances. Like, they'll mention the imminence of Jesus's return and how Jesus returns. Because when Jesus returns, he's mentioned as descending from the heavens. Also, he's on a white horse, and he returns with his angels. Just something to keep a remembrance of as I read some of these verses. But starting with Mark chapter 14, verse 61 and 62, Jesus is being questioned by a high priest, and the high priest asks him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And Jesus says, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven." So Jesus is asked a question directly by this high priest, and Jesus responds to the high priest, and he says, "I am the Christ, the Son of the Blessed." And he says to the high priest, "You will see the Son of Man coming with the clouds." So it speaks to the imminence, and it speaks to how Jesus will return. So let's look at another chapter in Mark chapter 13, verses 26 and 30. And this one just says, and then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass until all these things take place. So again, this generation speaks to the imminence and the manner in which how Jesus returns, coming with the clouds. So this dualistic nature spoken of in both these places. So let's take a look at Matthew chapter 16, verses 27 and 28. For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So again, how does Jesus return? With his angels, returning in the clouds, coming in the clouds. And it speaks to the imminence. There are some standing here who will not taste death until they see his return. This is Jesus speaking throughout all these instances. Let's look at Mark chapter 8, verse 38. Here Jesus is saying, for whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So again, the imminence, Jesus is saying, speaking to that generation, and also how Jesus returns with his holy angels. Again, all of these are Jesus speaking, and he's saying he's coming back. Jesus himself is saying his return is imminent, and it also alludes to how Jesus will return, coming with the clouds, descending from the heavens with his angels. And this is the last verse that is Jesus speaking that I'm going to present here. It's Matthew chapter 10, verse 23. And it's just Jesus talking to his disciples, telling them about an upcoming period of persecution they'll experience. So he just says, when they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. So this one isn't dual, like it doesn't say how Jesus will return as the previous four did, like descending from the heavens, coming with the clouds. But it does speak to the imminence. It's Jesus talking to his disciples saying, just keep fleeing from one town to the next, but you won't get through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man returns. Pretty clear. That's 5 verses. Now, there's 2 more that are pretty clear. This isn't Jesus speaking in these, but they're saying the same thing. Revelation chapter 1, verse 7, behold, he is coming with the clouds, referring to Jesus, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. So the manner in which Jesus returns with the clouds, coming with the clouds, and the imminence. So the people who pierced Jesus will see him returning, coming with the clouds, repeating the same message that was in the first 4 instances I showed you. And then the last example, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 15 through 16. For this we declare to you by a word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven. So again, the imminence, we who are alive, and the manner with which Jesus will return. He descends from heaven, from the clouds with his angels. That's 7 instances. And I just wanted to share that with you because there's many more verses than this. I think there's over 15 that I can think of, but I wanted to share with you these 7, 5 coming from Jesus himself, because there is scriptural evidence that backs this position up, that Jesus actually returned a while ago, and we're on the other side of that. But is there any physical evidence? I mean, it's all well and good. People have different interpretations of verses. Is there physical evidence? And this is where things get interesting for me, because I started by looking into our history. And when you look, and I've covered this before, but when you look at the official history and narrative of the Western Roman Empire, we're told it's a gradual fall over roughly 100 years. But when you start to see images of the Roman Empire, it's completely devastated. And what's interesting about the fall of the Western Roman Empire is you have this 1,000-year period of time called the Dark Ages that happen after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. And why that's interesting is because what I'm putting forward is that the Roman Empire was actually destroyed during Armageddon, which was in our past. And these Dark Ages probably weren't as dark as they're portraying. This would have been the millennial reign of Christ. It's just all being misdescribed to us. But as you continue to look into the damage done to what we call the Roman Empire, Rome itself, Italy itself, portions of it completely buried. There was excavations happening for decades, around the turn of the 20th century. But yeah, so you got a lot, there was places buried 20, 30, 40 feet deep. And when they expand their subway lines, they find Roman remains 30 feet deep. This was, they found the ruins of a Roman barracks. So they're continuously finding things 10, 20, 30 feet. And even there's Roman sites all throughout Europe. This one was in Sofia, Bulgaria. They were doing these excavations for their metro, their subway station, and they uncovered this Roman city, and it's buried 10, 20, 30 feet deep, and they turned it into a archaeological complex. So there's just a lot of buried Roman sites, and I've talked about the many buried Roman bathhouses that they find a lot of times accidentally. The UK has a lot of them. I touched on this one in Amman, Jordan, southern Spain. So the idea that I have is that these weren't just randomly buried because of earthquakes and the like, but the reason why all these things are buried and destroyed is because this was caused by Armageddon, which was in our past. Now, there's been other researchers who looked into the first millennium, the first 1,000 years, and it seems like there's been phantom time placed within that to sort of stretch out the timeline. And when you actually look at what was happening within Rome itself, there were almost nothing was being built from 300 AD to like 1000 AD. And the only thing that was actually being built, that according to the official narrative, were basilicas, basically churches. But when you look at the churches, whether they said they were built from 500 AD or 800 AD, they looked exactly like the churches from the first 300 years AD. So what I'm putting forward here is, and what this researcher who I covered in this video, the timeline manipulation, the idea, I believe, is that they are falsifying large portions of time in the first millennium. So if there was an Armageddon event, you'd think, well, it should affect other areas, right? You would think it would affect other areas, and it does. I think it does anyway. When you look at the history of Istanbul, used to be called Constantinople, you had these things, structures like the Hippodrome, and you had these harbors, and there's a large portion of the Hippodrome that's buried today, and there were excavations done in the 50s, revealing stadium steps. And there was this port of Theodosius, and I think in 2012 or thereabouts, they rediscovered this ancient port, buried 10, 20, 30 feet. And there's a lot of structures that are buried in Istanbul, and they have different, the official narrative gives different explanations for why all these things are buried, but I think that we're looking at this Armageddon event. That's why. It's just we're given cover story. In my view, we're given cover stories for all these things. And I think the Americas felt the brunt of this Armageddon event as well. And of course, the Maya empire comes to a mysterious end in the first millennium. And large portions of that empire are still buried underneath jungle and who knows how many layers of earth. So I think this was a worldwide event. In India, there were empires that came to an end. This particular empire, they discovered this particular empire or portions of it buried, and they thought these were hills, but these hills turned out to be remains of palace complexes and temples. And you could just see how deeply these things were buried. And I think this was because of an Armageddon event. So it's not only throughout Europe, it's also, I believe, throughout the world, and including Asia and India and the Americas. In the previous video, I also touched on, I think in part 1, this idea of during Armageddon, you would have elements melting with a fervent heat. And I talked about Cappadocia in Turkey. I just wanted to quickly mention there's this valley, the Phrygian Valley, which I think is about a little over 200 miles west of Cappadocia in Turkey. But there are just some really interesting looking formations. They look melted. I just wanted to kind of show these formations because they're just really interesting. But this notion that things could be melted, if that is the case, I think they might relate to this Armageddon event. Now, that leads me right into the idea of the first trumpet and the book of Revelation, because in Revelation chapter 8, verse 7, we have this description of the first angel blew his trumpet, and skipping down a bit, and a third of the earth was burnt up, and a third of the trees were burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. So if this actually happened, and this is in our past, we should see some evidences that this might have happened. And I think that you do see this evidence because all around the world there's these highly fertile soils, usually referred to as black earth or dark earth. They go by different names. In Asia and throughout Europe, there's another type of this black earth called Chernozem. It is one of the most fertile soils used in current agricultural production, and there's a bit of mystery usually surrounding these dark earths. Now, they don't know exactly how these came to be. They have theories, and one of them is that it was formed, these bands of this Chernozem were formed by intensive vegetation burning. So my thought is that these dark earths of mysterious origins, they were created during this Armageddon event. And in the United States and throughout Canada, instead of Chernozem, They call them mollisols. But in a previous video, I touched on a group of researchers who studied these dark earths in the Amazon rainforest, found that here in the US, we have grassland soils that contain lots of charcoal. So you have these highly fertile soils, charcoal rich, highly organic, and a lot of them have mysterious origins. There's theories, like people talk about previous cultures managing the soil, and then that information always gets lost. But the constant is this fertile soil all throughout the world, and I think it's related to this Armageddon event and the first trumpet. And again, in the Amazon rainforest, you have this probability sectional map, but the blue areas indicate where the dark earth sites are likely to be. And this particular soil geographer, William L. Woods at Southern Illinois University, says that this dark earth, or terra preta as it's referred to, it covers a surface area in the Amazon equivalent to the size of France. So there is a lot of this dark earth in the Americas and in Europe, Asia. You can find it in a lot of different places. They're finding it in more and more places. Yeah, there's theories, and one of the theories it's man-made, but there's also speculation that it's been created through natural processes. My view is that these dark earths, they were created during this Armageddon that happened in our past. And what has really convinced me that these dark earths were formed as a result of possibly this Armageddon event, which would have been in our past, is because they find this dark earth sitting on top of a lot of these different sites, primarily Roman sites. Whether the Roman sites are partially or fully buried, with a lot of those sites, they'll find this dark earth sitting on top of those sites. Why that's interesting is because if indeed the Armageddon is in our past, that would have affected what we call the Roman Empire. That would have been the empire that was existing when Jesus would have returned, if indeed that did happen in our past. So the fact you have this dark earth sitting on top of these Roman sites, these partially or fully buried Roman sites, it's just another indicator that something significant happened at that period of time. And as I've sort of been presenting here, I think we're looking at the first trumpet, things being burnt up on a massive scale. And this is just one of the indicators, all this dark earth. So, and there's a lot of sites, especially in the UK, during excavations, they'll find traces of this dark earth. So, but I've touched upon that in previous videos. So very interesting. And I think just last year, 2021, they found more of this dark earth at this former Roman site, Vindolanda. And they attribute the dark earth to, I think they attribute it to dwellings made out of wood that were built on top of the Roman site after the fact. But it's just so consistent across all these different countries and continents. I think it's just one major phenomena, but that is my view. Now, the last thing I'd like to touch on is just questioning if indeed we are on the other side of the millennium. Where did everybody go? And a lot of good ideas have been put forth, and people talking about extra land in the South Pole or in the North Pole, and there's some interesting maps. This is from Mercator 1606. So can't rule anything out, but I came across another interesting article that talks about the New Jerusalem during the millennium. Now, we know from the book of Revelation in chapter 21, verse 1 and 2, that there will eventually be a new heaven and a new earth, and the New Jerusalem, the holy city, fully descends at that time, which is in our future. But during the millennium, some people are speculating that the New Jerusalem will actually appear over the earth, but visible, below the heavens, but over the earth. They will be visible during this period of time. And this is just one particular article I came across, and you can pause and read this if you wish. But I'm still looking into it. There's not a lot of verses that directly talk about it, but there's some verses you could kind of infer that maybe the New Jerusalem partially descends during this period of time. But it's just, again, this is just a thought. I've just sort of come across this recently, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Something to think about. that's all I wanted to mention here at the end, and I think that's it for now. So until next time, take care.